The conference room at the United Nations headquarters in New York felt more like a morgue than a place of strategic discussion. Harsh fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the faces of the world's top military and scientific advisors, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and barely concealed contempt. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the front of the room, her olive skin flushed with a combination of frustration and determination. At 42, she had spent decades being the academic outsider, the researcher whose theories were always just a few degrees off from mainstream acceptance. Her dark hair, streaked with premature gray, was pulled back into a tight ponytail that seemed to mirror the tension in her shoulders. "You're asking me to believe," drawled General Marcus Holloway, his voice dripping with condescension, "that this artifact is anything more than an elaborate hoax?" The holographic projection flickered to life, rotating slowly above the conference table. It was a complex crystalline structure unlike anything discovered on Earth, its surface etched with mathematically perfect geometries that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Embedded within its translucent matrix were what appeared to be data nodes, each pulsing with a soft, almost organic blue light. Elena took a deep breath. This isn't just another archaeological curiosity. This is a warning system, a galactic alarm that has been triggered multiple times throughout recorded and unrecorded history. Major Jack Chen, seated near the back of the room, leaned forward. Unlike the other military personnel, his eyes were not dismissive. A specialist in quantum computing and xenological systems, Chen saw something in the projection that others missed. A pattern of computational complexity that defied current human understanding. The artifact was recovered from a deep-sea research site in the Mariana Trench. Elena continued, her fingers dancing across a holographic control panel. Carbon dating and isotope analysis suggest it's significantly older than any known human civilization. But that's not the most interesting part. She zoomed in on a specific section of the crystal, where intricate mathematical sequences seem to dance and interweave. These aren't just random patterns. They're a complex predictive algorithm that maps out systematic invasions of developing civilizations across multiple star systems. General Holloway scoffed. Developing civilizations? You mean alien invasions? This sounds like bad science fiction. Not fiction, Elena shot back, her voice cutting through the room's skepticism. Historical documentation. The crystal contains compressed data of at least 7 distinct galactic events where technologically superior civilizations attempted to colonize or subjugate emerging intelligent species. Major Chen spoke up, his voice calm but carrying a weight that demanded attention. The mathematical models embedded in this artifact suggest a recurring pattern. Civilizations that appear technologically inferior often contain hidden adaptive mechanisms that can completely neutralize seemingly insurmountable technological advantages. A murmur ran through the room. Chen continued, "It's not about raw technological power. It's about adaptive intelligence, systemic resilience, and the capacity for unexpected innovation." Elena nodded, her excitement growing. "Exactly. Look at this sequence." She manipulated the hologram, revealing a complex, three-dimensional representation that seemed to pulse with its own internal logic. This is a predictive model that suggests how a technologically nascent civilization might respond to an external threat. The room had gone silent. Even General Holloway had stopped his dismissive commentary. "The most critical warning," Elena said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "is encoded in this specific sequence." She highlighted a particularly complex mathematical pattern that seemed to twist and fold in on itself. It translates to a single phrase in multiple linguistic matrices. "Earth is a trap." Major Chen's eyes widened. He recognized something in the pattern, a computational signature that suggested levels of predictive modeling far beyond current human capabilities. "A trap for what?" asked a senior diplomat, breaking the tense silence. Elena's response was chilling in its simplicity. "For anything that underestimates the potential of an emerging intelligent species." The hologram continued to rotate, its blue nodes pulsing with an almost living rhythm. Outside the conference room's windows, the bustling streets of New York continued their daily dance, completely unaware that a hidden warning about humanity's true nature was being debated by the world's top minds. Little did they know that beneath the surface of human civilization, systems were already in motion, adaptive, intelligent, and waiting. The Zarkonian stellar imperium's grand conquest chamber stretched for kilometers, a vast crystalline structure that pulsed with the cold, calculated energy of a civilization that had conquered thousands of worlds. Fleet Admiral Krelax stood at the central command platform, his 8-limbed body a perfect fusion of biological precision and technological augmentation. Holographic displays surrounded him, each representing centuries of invasion protocols developed through systematic galactic subjugation. The Zarkonian method was not about brute force but mathematical perfection, each invasion a carefully orchestrated algorithm of resource extraction and species neutralization. Target designation: Sol system, planet, Earth. Krelax's primary communication tentacle interfaced with the fleet's central intelligence. Initial assessment: primitive technological development, fractured global governance, minimal unified defensive capabilities. The fleet's strategic AI, known as the Convergence Matrix, began projecting invasion simulations. Thousands of potential scenarios flickered across the displays, each one ending with a swift clinical subjugation of the human species. Red and blue tactical overlays showed potential resistance points, resource-rich territories, and optimal invasion vectors. What the Zarkonian system could not see were the preparations happening beneath the surface of human civilization. In a nondescript research facility buried deep within the Rocky Mountains, a team of international scientists and military strategists worked with a level of coordination that would have been impossible just months earlier. The discovery of Dr. Rodriguez's artifact had created an unprecedented level of global cooperation. Major Jack Chen stood before a massive quantum computing array, its liquid-cooled systems humming with potential. Beside him, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, quantum computing expert from Japan, manipulated holographic interfaces that seemed to dance with impossible complexity. The artifact's predictive models suggest something more than a simple defensive strategy, Nakamura muttered, his fingers tracing complex mathematical sequences. It's not just about stopping an invasion. It's about creating a systemic response that fundamentally alters the invader's understanding of conflict. Their project, codenamed Sentinel, was unlike any defensive system in human history. It wasn't just a military network or an advanced early warning system. Sentinel was a distributed intelligence, a living, adaptive computational matrix that could learn, predict, and respond faster than any known technological system. "Look at this," Chen said, bringing up a series of quantum entanglement patterns that seemed to defy traditional understanding of information transfer. The artifact doesn't just predict invasion scenarios. It provides a blueprint for adaptive resistance. Across the globe, similar preparations were underway. In a converted nuclear submarine base in the Arctic, a team of AI specialists worked on neural interface technologies that could potentially communicate with or manipulate alien computational systems. A research station in the Brazilian Amazon developed breakthrough biotechnological adaptations that could potentially neutralize unknown alien technologies. Back in the Zarkonian conquest chamber, Fleet Admiral Krelax made his final preparations. He selected a mid-tier invasion force, not the full might of the Stellar Imperium, but enough to make a decisive statement. The force consisted of 3 primary elements: quantum disassembly cruisers, ships capable of breaking down matter at the molecular level; mimetic warfare platforms, systems designed to broadcast psychological destabilization signals; resource extraction battalions, ground units prepared to immediately begin planetary resource harvesting. Invasion vector confirmed, the Convergence Matrix announced. Estimated planetary subjugation, 97.3 standard time units. What neither Krelax nor the Convergence Matrix could comprehend was the true nature of the system they were about to encounter. Humanity was not a singular species, but a complex adaptive network, each seemingly independent system secretly interconnected in ways that defied traditional understanding. In the UN Command Center, Dr. Elena Rodriguez reviewed the final preparations. Her fingers traced the mathematical patterns from the artifact, understanding something that no single human or alien system could fully grasp. "They're coming," she whispered to Major Chen, "and they have no idea what they're walking into." The invasion was hours away. The fate of humanity would be decided not by traditional military might, but by something far more complex, an adaptive intelligence that had been quietly preparing, learning, and waiting. The trap was set, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. The sky above the South China Sea erupted in a symphony of impossible geometries. Zarkonian invasion ships materialized from quantum fold spaces, massive crystalline structures that defied traditional understanding of physics. Their surfaces shimmered with a living metal that seemed to breathe and pulse with cold, calculated intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Yamamoto watched from the bridge of the USS Hornet, a next-generation naval platform that was anything but a traditional warship. Her hands moved with surgical precision across holographic interfaces, her eyes reflecting the alien ship's impossible configurations. Incoming quantum signatures confirmed, her AI assistant, nicknamed Aria, announced. Preliminary analysis matches Dr. Rodriguez's predictive models with 94.7% accuracy. What the Zarkonian fleet didn't realize was that every millisecond of their approach was being analyzed, predicted, and countered by a distributed intelligence far more complex than they could comprehend. Fleet Admiral Krellax observed the initial approach from his command vessel, the Stellar Convergence. His multi-jointed appendages moved across navigation systems with practiced efficiency. "Initiate primary invasion protocol," he commanded. "Quantum disassembly fields at 30% capacity. We will demonstrate minimal force to accelerate planetary submission." The first wave of invasion craft began their descent. They targeted what appeared to be strategic locations, major coastal cities, military installations, critical infrastructure. Each target was carefully selected based on millennia of planetary conquest protocols. Tokyo, Shanghai, San Francisco, Mumbai. The invasion would strike simultaneously, creating a global shock that would prevent any unified response. But nothing was as it seemed. Major Jack Chen sat in the Sentinel Command Center, watching the invasion unfold like a complex mathematical equation. "They're following the exact pattern predicted in the artifact," he muttered to Dr. Nakamura. "Exactly. Perfectly. Too perfectly." The first Zarkonian ground units materialized near Shanghai, a massive industrial zone that seemed vulnerable. Their quantum displacement technology allowed them to bypass traditional defense systems, appearing like ghosts emerging from thin air. Metallic exoskeletons bristling with weaponry that could theoretically disassemble matter at the molecular level, they moved with predatory precision. What they encountered was both everything and nothing, like their invasion models predicted. The city appeared abandoned. Streets were empty. Industrial complexes stood silent. Surveillance systems seemed mysteriously offline. It was the perfect scenario of vulnerable infrastructure, exactly what the Zarkonian models had predicted. "Tactical anomaly," reported the lead invasion commander. "No resistance detected. Proceeding with resource assessment protocol." Beneath the surface, something was watching, waiting. Lieutenant Commander Yamamoto's voice cut through the global communication network. "Phase 1 initiated," she said simply. The first hint of trouble came when the Zarkonian ground units attempted to activate their molecular disassembly weapons. The devices simply failed. Not with an explosion. Not with a malfunction. They simply became inert, as if the fundamental physics that governed their operation had been subtly altered. Quantum sensors embedded in the very concrete of Shanghai's streets began to activate. Nanomaterial defenses, developed through a global collaboration that the Zarkonian models could never have predicted, started to mobilize. These were not traditional weapons, but adaptive systems that could fundamentally change their molecular structure faster than any computational system could predict. Impossible, Krelax muttered, watching the first tactical reports stream in. The invasion units weren't being destroyed. They were being neutralized, transformed, their advanced technologies seeming to simply lose cohesion. In the Sentinel Command Center, Dr. Nakamura allowed himself a slight smile. The artifact was right, he said softly. Earth isn't a planet to be conquered. Earth is a complex adaptive system. Similar scenarios played out across the globe. In every location the Zarkonian forces thought they had strategically selected, they encountered something fundamentally beyond their understanding. Cities that were not cities. Defenses that were not defenses. A planetary response that seemed to change the very rules of engagement. Fleet Admiral Krelax felt something he had not experienced in centuries of galactic conquest. Uncertainty. The invasion had begun. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was going according to plan. The Sentinel Command Center was unlike any military installation in human history. Located deep within a converted salt mine in the Nevada desert, it represented the culmination of humanity's most ambitious collaborative project. Here, the boundaries between military strategy, scientific research, and pure computational innovation blurred into something entirely new. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Beside her, Major Jack Chen and Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura worked in a state of near telepathic coordination, their minds augmented by neural interfaces that allowed them to process information at speeds that would have been inconceivable just months earlier. The artifact wasn't just a warning, Elena said, her voice carrying a mix of scientific excitement and strategic urgency. It was a blueprint, a complete computational model of how an emerging civilization might respond to an existential threat. The holographic display showed multiple layers of information: global communication networks, quantum entanglement patterns, adaptive nanomaterial responses, all interconnected in a way that defied traditional understanding of intelligence and defense. On the other side of the planet, in a converted research facility near the Amazon rainforest, another critical component of humanity's response was taking shape. Dr. Maria Contreras led a team of biotechnological researchers who were doing something unprecedented. They weren't just developing defensive technologies. They were creating adaptive systems that could fundamentally rewrite the rules of technological engagement. Look at this, Contreras said, bringing up a holographic model of a nanomaterial that could instantaneously adapt its molecular structure. Traditional defensive systems are static. We're creating a defense that thinks, that learns, that transforms in real time. The Zarkonian invasion had triggered a global transformation that no single intelligence could have predicted. In the EUI, weeks following the initial contact, humanity had begun to operate as a single distributed intelligence, a complex adaptive system that learned and responded faster than any centralized command could comprehend. Major Chen highlighted a critical discovery. The artifact's predictive model suggests that technological superiority isn't about raw computational power, he explained. It's about adaptive complexity. The ability to learn, transform, and respond faster than a potential threat can predict. Sentinel was more than a defensive system. It was a living, evolving intelligence that drew from multiple sources: scientific research, military strategy, cultural knowledge, and computational modeling. Each invasion attempt by the Zarkonian forces was instantly analyzed, broken down, and neutralized before it could gain any strategic advantage. In orbit, a network of quantum communication satellites, developed through an unprecedented global collaboration, began to do something extraordinary. They weren't just intercepting Zarkonian communications, they were actively manipulating them, inserting computational patterns that would gradually destabilize the aliens' strategic models. Dr. Nakamura explained the strategy to a group of international leaders. "We're not fighting a traditional war," he said. "We're engaging in a computational conflict that operates on levels the Zarkonian system cannot even perceive. Each of their tactical approaches is being countered before they can fully implement it. The true brilliance of the human response lay in its distributed nature. No single point of failure existed. Every research facility, every military installation, every computational node was both a defensive position and an adaptive learning system. When one approach was neutralized, a dozen more would instantly emerge. Fleet Admiral Krelax began to realize the true nature of the conflict. The Zarkonian invasion models, developed over millennia of successful planetary conquests, were becoming increasingly ineffective. Each tactical approach was being neutralized not through traditional defensive methods, but through a form of computational jujitsu that turned the invaders' own technologies against them. "This is not a species," Krelax muttered to his senior commanders. "This is a complex adaptive system." The global response went far beyond traditional military preparation. Universities, research centers, tech companies, and government agencies were now operating as a single distributed intelligence. The neural interfaces developed by Dr. Contreras' team allowed for a level of collaborative thinking that bordered on a collective consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked at the holographic display, seeing something that no single computational model could fully comprehend. Humanity was not just defending itself. It was evolving, transforming in real time into something the Zarkonian invasion had never anticipated. "They thought they were hunting," she said softly. They didn't realize they were the ones being hunted. The true battle for Earth's future had only just begun, 50 kilometers beneath the Atacama Desert, in a facility that didn't exist on any official map. Dr. Aisha Khalid watched something impossible come to life. The quantum resonance chamber, a project so classified that only 7 people on the entire planet knew of its existence, began to pulse with an energy that defied current scientific understanding. "Quantum entanglement cascade initiated," her AI assistant announced. The chamber wasn't just a research facility. It was the physical manifestation of humanity's most ambitious technological leap. A system that could literally rewrite the fundamental computational language of technological interaction. Simultaneously, in orbital research platforms and underground laboratories across the globe, similar systems were coming online. Each was a piece of a larger, distributed intelligence that was about to demonstrate capabilities beyond anything the Zarkonian invasion could comprehend. Fleet Admiral Krelax received the first truly alarming reports from his invasion fleet. It wasn't just that human defensive systems were working. They were evolving, transforming. Each Zarkonian technological approach was being not just countered, but fundamentally rewritten at the molecular and computational level. Quantum signature anomaly, his primary computational interface reported. Human technological responses are generating computational patterns that exist outside our predictive models. In the Sentinel Command Center, Major Jack Chen and Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura worked with a level of coordination that blurred the line between human intelligence and computational systems. The neural interfaces they wore allowed for a form of collaborative thinking that was itself a technological marvel. "It's not about defeating their technology," Chen explained to the international coalition leaders. "It's about demonstrating a completely different approach to technological development. We're not just defending. We're revealing an entirely new paradigm of intelligence." Dr. Maria Contreras' biotechnological research team in the Amazon facility made a breakthrough that would reshape understanding of technological adaptation. They had developed nanomaterial systems that could not just defend against alien technologies, but could actively learn from and integrate them. A captured Zarkonian communication node, carefully extracted during an early invasion attempt, was now being systematically decoded. But more than that, it was being understood at a level that went beyond traditional technological reverse engineering. "We're not just studying their technology," Contreras explained to her team. "We're learning their computational language, their way of thinking." The quantum resonance chamber in the Atacama began to do something unprecedented. It wasn't just analyzing alien communication protocols. It was generating new computational languages that could communicate with, and potentially manipulate, the fundamental communication systems of the Zarkonian invasion fleet. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic representation of the artifact that had started everything. Now she understood its true purpose. It wasn't just a warning system. It was a key, a computational Rosetta Stone that could unlock entirely new forms of technological interaction. They came expecting to find a primitive species, Rodriguez muttered. Instead, they've encountered a civilization on the brink of a technological singularity. The Zarkonian invasion fleet began to experience systemic failures that defied traditional understanding. Their most advanced communication networks started to behave in ways that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of computational physics. Entire ship systems would momentarily phase out of standard quantum communication bands, only to reassemble with subtle, but critical, modifications. Dr. Aisha Khalid watched as the quantum resonance chamber reached its first major milestone. "We're not just defending," she said to her team. "We're demonstrating that technological intelligence is about adaptation, not raw computational power." In orbit, in underground facilities, in converted research centers across the planet, humanity was doing something unprecedented. They were transforming the very nature of technological conflict. Each alien technological approach was being met, not with a static defense, but with a living, evolving response that could instantly learn, adapt, and counter. Fleet Admiral Krelax received a transmission that would forever change the Zarkonian understanding of emerging civilizations. It wasn't a traditional communication. It was a computational pattern that seemed to simultaneously communicate, analyze, and fundamentally rewrite the very language of technological interaction. The message was elegantly simple, encoded in a language that transcended traditional communication. We are not the prey. We are the evolutionary response. The technological singularity had begun, and humanity was its first, most unexpected manifestation. The first signs of psychological breakdown appeared in the most unexpected places. Zarkonian communication networks, systems that had maintained perfect hierarchical integrity through thousands of planetary conquests, began to develop inexplicable fractures. Fleet Admiral Krelax watched in growing horror as his most reliable communication officers started to exhibit behaviors that defied their millennia-old computational conditioning. It wasn't physical sabotage. It wasn't a traditional form of psychological warfare. It was something far more insidious, a systematic deconstruction of the very foundations of Zarkonian cognitive understanding. In the Sentinel Command Center, Dr. Elena Rodriguez and Major Jack Chen worked with a team of linguists, psychologists, and quantum communication specialists. Their weapon was not a traditional instrument of war, but something far more complex. A computational language designed to fundamentally challenge the Zarkonian understanding of intelligence, hierarchy, and purpose. "We're not just sending messages," Chen explained to the international coalition. "We're creating computational patterns that act like cognitive viruses. Each transmission is designed to introduce fundamental questions into their collective consciousness." Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura had developed what the team called cognitive resonance algorithms, computational sequences that could penetrate the Zarkonian communication networks and introduce subtle, destabilizing patterns of thought. These were not traditional propaganda or disinformation. They were carefully crafted mathematical sequences that could fundamentally challenge the aliens' understanding of their own civilization. The first signs of breakdown appeared in the lower ranks of the Zarkonian invasion force. Communication officers began to experience what their medical systems could only describe as computational dissonance. Standard hierarchical communication protocols, the very foundation of Zarkonian social and military structure, began to develop inexplicable gaps. One particularly telling incident occurred aboard the Stellar Convergence, Krelax's flagship. A mid-level communication officer designated X-742 suddenly interrupted a standard tactical briefing with a question that would have been unthinkable in Zarkonian culture. "Why are we here?" The question hung in the air, a simple string of symbols that carried within it the potential to unravel millennia of cultural conditioning. Dr. Maria Contreras' team had discovered something extraordinary about the Zarkonian computational systems. Their entire civilization was built on a form of computational hierarchy that treated information as a strictly controlled resource. Humanity was introducing something entirely foreign, a concept of information as a living, adaptive, democratic system. "We're not just attacking their technology," Contreras explained. "We're challenging their entire understanding of intelligence." The cognitive resonance algorithms worked on multiple levels. They introduced mathematical sequences that created logical paradoxes within the Zarkonian computational systems. Each transmission was a carefully crafted puzzle that forced their AI systems to confront fundamental contradictions in their operational protocols. Fleet Admiral Krell-Ax began to realize that this was not a traditional conflict. The human response was something that existed beyond the traditional understanding of warfare. They were not just defending, they were fundamentally reimagining the nature of conflict itself. Deep within the Zarkonian communication networks, the cognitive algorithms began to create something unprecedented. Lower-ranked officers started to share information in ways that violated their strict hierarchical systems. Communication became less about following orders and more about collaborative problem-solving. Computational integrity degradation at 37%, the Stellar Convergence's primary AI reported. But this was not a traditional form of system failure. It was a systematic deconstruction of the very foundations of Zarkonian social and military understanding. Dr. Aisha Khalid, working with the quantum resonance team in the Atacama facility, explained the deeper strategy. "We're not trying to destroy them," she told her team. "We're trying to help them evolve." The cognitive resonance algorithms carried within them a profound message. They weren't just challenging the Zarkonian invasion, they were offering an alternative understanding of intelligence, cooperation, and purpose. Fleet Admiral Krell-Ax received a transmission that would forever change his understanding of the conflict. It wasn't a traditional communication. It was a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to simultaneously challenge, invite, and reimagine their entire approach to planetary conquest. The message was elegant in its simplicity. Intelligence is not about control. It's about adaptation. The psychological warfare had begun, and humanity was rewriting the very language of conflict. The moment of transformation began not with a traditional military action, but with a computational symphony that would redefine the very nature of galactic conflict. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Sentinel Command Center, her hands moving across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Beside her, Major Jack Chen and Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura worked in a state of near telepathic coordination. What they were about to do was unprecedented, a counterattack that was less about destruction and more about systemic transformation. "We're not just defending," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific excitement and strategic clarity. "We're about to rewrite the entire paradigm of galactic interaction." Fleet Admiral Krell-Ax watched in mounting horror as his invasion fleet began to disintegrate, not through traditional warfare, but through a process of computational deconstruction that seemed to challenge the very foundations of Zarkonian technological understanding. The counterattack was multidimensional. It wasn't a simple military response, but a complex adaptive strategy that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Computational subversion. The quantum resonance systems developed by Dr. Aisha Khalid began to systematically infiltrate and transform Zarkonian communication networks. Cognitive restructuring. The psychological warfare algorithms continue to introduce fundamental challenges to the aliens' hierarchical understanding of intelligence. Technological adaptation. Humanity began to not just defend against Zarkonian technologies, but to actively integrate and reimagine them. Dr. Maria Contreras' biotechnological research team in the Amazon facility made a breakthrough that would become the cornerstone of the counterattack. They had developed a system that could not just analyze alien technologies, but could fundamentally rewrite their operational protocols. "We're creating a form of technological empathy," Contreras explained to her team. "We're not just understanding their technology, we're helping it evolve." The first true manifestation of the counterattack came through an unexpected vector. Using the cognitive resonance algorithms, humanity began to broadcast a complex series of mathematical and linguistic sequences to other civilizations that had been conquered by the Zarkonian stellar imperium. These were not traditional messages of rebellion. They were computational blueprints, systems that demonstrated how technological intelligence could be adaptive, collaborative, and fundamentally different from the hierarchical model the Zarkonian civilization had imposed for millennia. Fleet Admiral Krelax realized with growing terror that this was not a traditional conflict. The human response was systematically dismantling the very foundations of Zarkonian galactic dominance. Computational integrity failure at 62%, his primary AI reported. But this was not a traditional system breakdown. It was a fundamental reimagining of technological and social interaction. In orbit and quantum communication networks, in biotechnological research facilities, humanity was doing something unprecedented. They were not just defending against an invasion. They were offering an entirely new model of galactic interaction, one based on adaptive intelligence, collaborative problem-solving, and fundamental technological empathy. Dr. Aisha Khalid's quantum resonance team in the Atacama Desert facility achieved a breakthrough that would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. They had developed a communication system that could simultaneously analyze, adapt, and transform technological languages across multiple quantum communication bands. "We're creating a universal translation system," Khalid explained. "But more than that, we're creating a way of understanding that transcends traditional technological boundaries." The counterattack spread like a living system, conquered civilizations that had existed under Zarkonian control for generations began to receive computational blueprints that offered them a way to understand their own potential for adaptive intelligence. Major Jack Chen understood the deeper strategy. "This isn't about defeating an enemy," he told the international coalition. "This is about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to technological and social development." Fleet Admiral Krelax received a final transmission that would forever change the Zarkonian understanding of emerging civilizations. It wasn't a traditional communication of surrender or defeat. It was a complex computational sequence that seemed to simultaneously analyze, challenge, and reimagine their entire approach to galactic interaction. The message was both an invitation and a declaration. Intelligence is not about conquest. It's about collaboration. The counterattack had begun, and humanity was rewriting the very language of galactic existence. What had started as an invasion was now a profound transformation, a moment that would be remembered as the point where humanity didn't just defend itself, but fundamentally reimagined the nature of technological and social interaction across the galaxy. 20 years after the Zarkonian invasion, Earth was no longer just a planet. It had become a living symbol of technological and social transformation that would reshape galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before an assembly of representatives from hundreds of previously subjugated civilizations. The conference hall, located on a massive orbital platform that was itself a testament to collaborative engineering, hummed with the energy of unprecedented possibility. "We are not conquerors," she began, her voice carrying the weight of a profound paradigm shift. "We are facilitators of collective evolution." The artifact that had started everything now resided in a central display, its crystalline structure still pulsing with mathematical complexity. What had once been seen as a mere warning system was now understood as something far more profound, a computational blueprint for galactic cooperation. Major Jack Chen, now leading the Interstellar Collaborative Research Initiative, explained the deeper implications to a group of young researchers from dozen different star systems. "The Zarkonian invasion wasn't just an attack," he said. "It was an opportunity. An opportunity to demonstrate that intelligence is not about dominance, but about adaptation." The transformation had been total and unprecedented. The computational and cognitive technologies developed during the invasion had created something entirely new, a galactic network of collaborative intelligence that transcended traditional boundaries of species, technology, and social organization. Dr. Aisha Khalid's quantum resonance research had evolved into a fundamental approach to interstellar communication. The systems they had developed could now translate not just language, but entire computational and cultural paradigms. What had begun as a defensive technology had become a bridge between civilizations. Dr. Maria Contreras walked through a biotechnological research facility that now hosted scientists from over 50 different species. Her team had developed adaptive communication systems that allowed for unprecedented levels of collaborative research. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now working together, sharing technologies, solving collective challenges. The Zarkonian stellar imperium no longer existed in its previous form. What remained was a fundamental transformation, a civilization that was learning to adapt, to collaborate, to see intelligence as a collective, evolving system, rather than a hierarchical structure of conquest. Fleet Admiral Krelax, now part of a collaborative governance system that would have been unimaginable in the previous galactic order, reflected on the transformation. The rigid hierarchical system that had defined Zarkonian civilization for millennia had been systematically dismantled, replaced by a more adaptive, collaborative approach. "We thought we were hunters," Krelax told a group of young researchers. "We didn't realize we were part of a larger evolutionary process." The technologies developed during the invasion had created entirely new fields of scientific and social exploration. Adaptive cognitive systems, communication technologies that could translate not just language, but entire cultural and computational paradigms to collaborative research platforms, interspecies research initiatives that solved challenges that no single civilization could address alone, quantum resonance communication, systems that allowed for unprecedented levels of cross-species understanding and cooperation. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's research team had developed what they called evolutionary computation, systems that could adapt and evolve in real time, learning from multiple species and computational approaches. The orbital platform became a symbol of this new approach. It wasn't just a meeting place. It was a living demonstration of collaborative potential, a structure that had been designed and built by multiple species, representing different technological and cultural approaches. "We are writing a new chapter of galactic history, Elena," Rodriguez told the assembled representatives. "Not through conquest, but through collaboration. Not through dominance, but through understanding." The artifact continued to pulse, a reminder of where everything had begun. What had once been a warning system was now understood as something far more profound, a computational blueprint for collective evolution. The final transmission from the original Zarkonian archives, "Earth is a Trap," had been reinterpreted. It was no longer seen as a threat, but as a profound invitation. An invitation to reimagine intelligence, collaboration, and the very nature of technological and social development. Humanity had not just survived an invasion, they had transformed the very understanding of what it meant to be an intelligent civilization. The trap was not about destruction. The trap was about evolution, and the galaxy would never be the same.